recording here. Okay. So we're gonna jump right in because I know you have things to do today, and I'm gonna go to yoga class later this morning, and so we'll just get started. So our topic is this morning is thinking about the ways technology has impacted literacy to the point where it's difficult to imagine going back. So it's irrevocable changes that have occurred in the ways we read and write and the ways we teach reading and writing to kids. So I'll start and just give a little example, and then we'll just let people kind of join in. So I appreciate how kind people have been about my father-in-law passing away. He was a really special man, and he was 93 and read all his life, a big reader. But the last probably 5 years of his life, he felt like he wasn't really a reader anymore. And he had vision trouble. So he had the thick glasses. He had the special reading light that kind of hung right over his chair. He had the big magnifying lens that he used for reading. He had the big print books, and he still struggled with reading, being able to read, to the point where he didn't really read very much because it was so difficult for him. And so all his life he had viewed himself as a reader, but as he got older, he wasn't able to do the one thing that he really loved, which was very sad. But I wish I could say, there was this brilliant aha moment when we got him a reading device like a Kindle or an iPad, and all of a sudden, it worked great for him. It didn't happen that way because he didn't want to use technology. But if he had, an electronic device can change the size of the font and make it bigger. It can use a backlight. So a device could have helped him, and it does help lots of other people, still view himself as a reader. Now, I'm all for print. I love print books. That's what I read the most. But I think there are things that an electronic reader can do that can help people feel like they're still readers that print can't do. I mean, that's just a change that can impact the ways we read. So think about your own experiences, the people in your families or the children that you teach. What do you notice as ways technology is changing things that, is just not going to go back to the old way?
I think that the ability to have that assisted technology, especially for our special ed students and stuff like that, I think that's irreplaceable. And the stuff that we can do with the technology for them, I think is amazing. And so I think that's probably where I see it the most. My family still goes back. I still am one of those that I print all the articles out because I have to highlight and take notes, and I haven't figured out how to toggle effectively on screens without getting myself lost if I'm using 3 different articles to write a paper. And so I'm not used to it yet, but that's kind of showing my age as well. But I think that, I think helping those kids that definitely, I've had students with eyesight issues, and just different, some just respond to that Kindle way better than they do to holding a book. There's something kinesthetically that's different, I think, for them that makes it easier.
And with the app Audible, it helps a little boy, and he was 2 grades above me. I never had him. He improved by 3 reading levels purely by following along with the print book and listening to Audible, because he read 3 levels below his peers. But he was still his comprehension was high enough that he could follow along and listen and understand and participate just by listening to an audiobook along with reading as he went. And so I think having those, like you said, for the special ed kids really helps. Mm-hmm. And I know with my class, they really liked having what we were reading up on the Smartboard or Promethean board. Just it kept their attention longer because I could stop, highlight, And then if I found like a YouTube video of a read aloud, they were more interested in that because it wasn't their classmates reading and it wasn't me reading.
Mm-hmm.
So that helped keep them engaged and participate even longer.
That's true. I love Audible, and I'm also, I don't work for Amazon, but I'm a big Kindle fan because they have so many things available. And Kindle has WhisperSync, which when you buy the ebook, for some ebooks, you can also get the audio version to go with it. So then that lets, and those are for even like longer chapter books. So that lets you have that audio and visual there together within the device, which is really handy.
A Kindle has sound?
You can buy books that have WhisperSync that kind of it like overlays onto the book. And, you know, in the past it had a really stilted voice, you know, one of those computerized voices, but they've improved that technology so much that the voice sounds really natural. And on some devices, you can choose the accent or whether you want what gender you want the voice to be in. You can get like a British accent, which a lot of times kids will like because that sounds really, I mean, I would like that too. But that's really a nice feature to mix that, to pair that audio and visual together.
Is there still something to be said, though, for rhythm and inflection and that part of reading that, you know, to make the story come alive versus having, I mean, I know a lot of the audibles are somebody reading it, and so they're reading it with that, but I don't know.
Well, I think you're right. You know, it's a mixture of things. It can't just be one thing. And to teach fluency, of course, you want to give kids good models. And the audibles have, a lot of those have professional voice actors. So you get really high quality fluency. But there is still something to be said for kids practicing their own fluency and building up those skills too. And technology does let us help kids do that. I mean, there's so many ways to record kids on the iPad that there's lots of opportunities to practice fluency. Somebody have a dog?
Yes, sorry. I'm trying to make them be quiet.
Oh, that's okay. We don't mind dogs.
I didn't put them outside.
It's all right. Don't worry about it. You're fine.
And I've noticed with the new testing stuff through Kite that for the audio for the kids that do qualify for that service, it reads too fast, you can't slow it down, and it reads everything at once. So that on top of a kid that already struggles with reading, it doesn't help because you can't do like sentence by sentence. It's the whole thing every time. So I had kiddos that it actually was detrimental to because it stressed them out more having to listen to that voice. And then that caused them to not use it. And then on the other hand, I had the other kid that didn't care and just click, click, click through it no matter what the thing said. So I think that in that case, it's detrimental to the kids that need it.
Yeah, that's a good point. If the quality of the recording isn't high, then it's not really doing you any good. Did we lose Ashley and Jill?
Hi. No, we're here.
Okay, I didn't see you. Okay. Oh, I guess it only I see. Up at the top, it only has slots for 5. Okay. This is the most people that I've had on a Zoom meeting, so.
We use translators for our ESL kids. Like there was one in 3rd grade who spoke 0 English, and so that's how the teacher communicated with him, was through the translation app on the iPad. Or iPad.
Talk a little bit more about how that worked.
She would talk into it, and then it would show up on the screen translated, and then he would speak in Spanish and it would translate it to English for the teacher.
So it's going from speech to text, and that's how they can communicate with each other.
Yeah.
Did that work pretty well?
Yeah, for the beginning, because there was no comprehension of anything at the beginning. So.
You know, that something like that, that's a game changer for kids that are just learning English.
Mm-hmm.
And all I really had to rely on in the past was a classmate to translate for them. So
yeah.
I had a Japanese student use a translator, which was very helpful since I'm very, very not fluent in Japanese.
Uh-huh.
I think since the technology is not, it's obviously not going to go anywhere. It's not going to go back. We're not going back to textbooks.
No.
Anytime. And so I think that that's probably the hardest thing to wrap your head around is that, okay, then we do have to stay so up to date on all of the latest technology that it almost becomes overwhelming because there are so many new things that are, I mean, the kids are coming to you and saying, look what I found. This is the new app. And I'm like, where in the world did you find that? And that would be helpful last week, you know? But I just don't know how to even keep up.
I agree. It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming for teachers and parents trying to keep up. And it kind of, I mean, I think this idea did come out in our book a little bit, but the idea that because kids are bringing things to us, we assume that they're ahead of us, but actually they're not. They may find things or they may have really limited access to what they are using, but they're not ahead of us when it comes to using these tools to learn. It's cool and fun to play with and looks really great, but you know, we're still the experts in how to use those or any other tools to learn. And so sometimes teachers will let that kind of get them down thinking, well, what do I have to offer my kids when it comes to technology because they know so much more than I do, but that really isn't the case.
If they could find it, implementing it to use it in the way that helps them learn is what they struggle with, which is what we have to keep in mind when we're like, okay, let's use internet websites to do an inquiry project on, or like for me in 4th grade, they have to know states and capitals. So at the end of the year, we do a state project, and I make them use the book first, and then I give them certain websites that they could look on just to cover my bases so that they're not on the internet. Because since I worked at a Catholic school, there were certain things I had to be careful about because I can't always trust the kid websites. Because I've noticed that the ads, it says a kid website, but at the same time, some of the ads that pop up are not appropriate. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So just for my own sanity, I didn't want them to do too much Google searching so that I knew where they were going. So it's just learning to let them explore in an educational setting.
Mm-hmm. Well, keeping them safe. That's the balance. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, back to the kids bringing you stuff and it making you feel like they know more than you. My kids tend to bring me things just because they're colorful and because there are characters that move around and stuff. But once you actually ask them, like, what value is this for our lesson, there's usually not any. So, and I do have kids who will only read on the computer. Like we have several programs that we use in our classroom for students to access books, and they will not pick up a book and do any kind of reading. Like in the morning, we have our MERT time, which is basically like a silent reading time. And when you watch those kids, they're never reading. But when they get the time in the afternoon to do like Raz Kids online, they can't get enough reading. So I think it's just, they think that if it's on a computer or it's on an iPad, it's cool. If you're holding a book, that's old school and it's lame. So it's interesting.
Do you think that idea will change when technology isn't quite so new in the classroom, or are we headed down a path where it's just going to keep in that direction? What do you think?
As long as they keep making new things and make them cool and colorful, I think they're going to keep. I mean, I have kids who talk about reading on iPhones, which I don't even understand how you do. The screen's so tiny, but they'll sit and read on an iPhone, but not a book. I think as long as they keep, and I'm sure they will, keep making newer, cooler things, the kids are just going to stay hooked on it.
And what does that mean for teachers in the future? It's like we have these two dichotomies because we grew up with the print, and most teachers still have a strong fondness for print. Even if they do read on a device, they still have a fondness for print. But our children are growing up without that same connection to print.
I've noticed that, so my kids would gripe and complain about a book for a literature circle until like we got into it, because at this point I feel kind of lucky that the school I worked at was so small that we only had 20 Kunos for the whole 120 kids we have, so we had to share all those. So we didn't get to use them as much for reading. So my kids would get excited when I would whip out a pile of books for a literature circle because they knew a new book was coming. Like I did the Tales of the Fourth Grade Nothing, which was written a long time ago, and they still really enjoyed it. I had a lot of kids say that was their favorite, even though Judy Blume wrote it and it takes place in the 50s. And so we had to do a lot of discussions about it. And I think part of it depends on the nature of the school and your kids. Because my kids, I had a lot of them say that they don't like to read on the Kunos. They don't, that they prefer a book in their hand. And what I said, because we do a Battle of the Books competition between Newton, McPherson, and Oast. And one of my boys, he struggles with comprehension, and he wasn't too sure about doing it. And I said, what if you could find audiobooks that go along with, and then you can read it and listen to it at the same time? I go, you can even get your mom into listening too, and then she can help you answer the questions that you have about the text. And his eyes got real big, and he's like, there's audiobooks? I was like, oh boy, yes. So it's just, but I was in a small school, so we just didn't have that, and he wasn't aware that was available. And since I was the most tech savvy teacher on staff, I was the one that came up with it, and his mom was so excited because she was also a teacher at the school. She goes, I never thought of that. I was like, that's why I got hired. Like I was hired to help you with the technology stuff.
But your point about personal preferences, even some kids do still prefer print. So we have to, it's so easy to make assumptions about kids and technology. So we do have to keep that in mind, that they don't all prefer devices.
But a lot of like my tactile kids or my kinesthetic kids, they want something to hold on to. And if it's a device, they're scared to drop it, so they don't hold it. They put it on their desk and they stare at it. But if it's a book, they can open it and they can.
So I'm going to come back to what Jill was saying about kids who, and kind of link that to what you're saying, Laura, about kids who won't read unless it's on a device. do you force them to get the book in their hands sometimes, or do you just go with what they want to do and say, you know, at least they're reading? What do you think is the best?
I think you have to give them both, and only because there's going to be a time where they're not going to be able to have a certain piece on a device. Like, not everything that's on a device. So if I'm reading a book club book or something like that, and I can't find it on a Kindle or the copy on somewhere, I mean, they're going to have to be able to adapt to that. So I think that takes you to that whole idea of the adaptiveness, where they're going to have to know how to go through a print book, and they're going to have to know how to go through an online book. So I think that's where we have to teach. I think they have to be exposed to both, because in the future, I mean, it could go everything online, but there's still going to be libraries, and there's still, well, I hope, and there's still going to be Scholastic Book Fair, and there's still going to have to know how to go through a book and go back and find things. And, you know, depending on if it's a novel, or it could be, you know, they love the Guinness Book of World Records books, all of those kinds of things. So I think I don't feel bad about forcing them to use a print book every now and again.
I'm kind of with you. I don't think print is going to completely go away. I think we're in a transition time where we're figuring out this idea that you said, Teresa, about adapting. And you have to be able to take both of the sources and make sense of them. And that is a challenge. It isn't all or nothing, but when you're in the middle, now you have to be good at both.
Well, and when you're dealing with kids, I think a lot of it is just like a mind struggle, because speaking of the Scholastic Book Fair, I have kids that I could not get to like use my classroom library because they don't want to read a book. But yet when the Scholastic Book Fair came, they would go down and buy a book from the book fair, bring it to my classroom. They were excited and they would read it. I have 3 copies of the same book in my library. So just them getting to go down and buy it. I can also, with my 3rd graders, I can take a print book and just put it on my Elmo. It comes up on the smart board, and all of a sudden that's technology to them. It's the print book. And they also don't have problems, like if I'm doing my read alouds, they don't have a problem if I'm reading a book. But I've had a couple of kids say that that's what old people do. They read books, and young people use technology. So there shows no age.
Even though the book is the same thing on the technology as it is.
Yes. Yes.
Interesting.
I remember when some of us had cassette tape recorders and other people had CD players. So it's the same thing from 20 years ago.
Oh, my dad for Father's Day wanted, a few weeks ago we went to the Neil Diamond concert, and he wanted me to get him a CD from Neil Diamond's greatest hits for Father's Day. And then he says, oh, no, wait a minute. Make it a cassette, because I still have a cassette player in my car. And I think, Dad, where am I going to get a cassette?
Well, I think, with a lot of kids that I work with in the school I was at last year, I think a lot of them still don't have a lot of access to technology at home. So I think there really is just a very large divide. And I'm kind of curious, because I'm going to be going to a new school district this fall that is considered a little bit more wealthy of an area. So I know my school has a ton more technology than my last one. So I'm kind of just curious to see the differences that I get from that, and just what kids have been exposed to and what they come to school knowing already in regards to technology.
Well, I think you're right, Michelle, about that divide, and it's getting bigger because we're seeing more districts move to one-to-one initiatives, whereas others are not, and that makes the divide huge. And I know in Kansas there's pockets of districts where maybe all the high school students or all the middle school students get a device, or at elementary it's 2-to-1 or sometimes 1-to-1, and that having that device in your hands every single day makes such a huge difference. So the divide, I think, is just getting bigger.
Yeah, I would agree.
I heard the other day that there's a district in Nebraska where they just adopted Chromebooks for all 40,000 kids in the district.
Wow.
I mean, that's just, if you imagine how that's going to change learning in those classrooms, it's mind-boggling.
I think what I see, though, coming from Texas to Missouri, where in Texas we weren't on a one-to-one. We had WOW carts, like we could check out the laptops and check out the iPads, but all of our kids had them at home because I was in one of those high socioeconomic districts and areas. But I think what scares me is that when you do have an initiative like that where every single person has one, I feel like that's what happened when I came up here, that then all they use is technology and all the teachers are using, and then they're expecting parents to understand it. There were so many times where as a teacher I was like, oh, that's a really cool thing you're doing, but then as a parent, when my kids are coming home and they're confused, and I'm like, I don't know how your math textbook works. I don't know where she put that. I don't know what folder it's in for you. And so you guys have to figure that out. And so I think that's kind of a hard thing to communicate, that I'm going to be using all of this technology. Now, parents, good luck. Is kind of how it happened. So I think we have to be sensitive to that when we assign things, we have to make sure the kids know what in the world they're going to do when they get home. But then you also have to be prepared. At some point, internet goes out. And we've all been teaching a class, and we've all been standing in the front when the whole thing shut down, and then you have to adapt. And so I think I've seen kids, when their computer won't work, they just stop the assignment. And they don't know, okay, now what do I do? And so I think that's where technology makes me nervous every now and again.
Definitely. That's a good point about the parents. I think sometimes forget about them. There used to be a charter school in Emporia that was one-to-one, and this was 5 years ago. So it was just a real pioneer school, and it was fairly small, and they didn't have any textbooks. So, I mean, imagine 5 years ago, that's quite a different time than we're in even right now. But they held after school sessions for the parents and the people in the community. And so the kids would just all bring in their laptops, and parents and community people could come in, and they did one-to-one tutoring with the adults. The kids teaching the adults how to use things like Google Drive or Skype, or tools that they weren't familiar with, which I thought was such an incredible experience for the kids, but also really great PR for the parents, and to help bring them on board and give them confidence. Ashley and Jill, talk a little bit about, isn't there a Chromebook initiative in Emporia?
Yeah, we just got approved K-12 one-to-one Chromebooks in our district.
Oh, okay. So you haven't had them yet?
No, we've had it 5th grade and up. We've had one-to-one, but they're now adding kindergarten through 4th grade.
How do the teachers feel about that?
Kindergarten.
Yeah. I don't know. They're not so happy about it because they're going to be expected to use them. And like the first half of the year, it's just teaming them. And so I don't know how it's going to work. But like I'm a 5th grade teacher, and so like it's helpful to have that. And I think it'll be beneficial to have kids start using them at younger grades. So when they get to me, they already know how to access things, but I don't know. How do you feel about it?
I teach 3rd grade, so I'm going from pretty much no technology in my classroom other than my smartboard to now everyone's going to have their own device. And I'm the person who reads the book in my hand. So I'm freaking out a little bit, but It'll all be fine.
Listen to that positiveness in your voice.
That's what teaching is. Keep calm and get through it.
Yes.
You know, we went to a one-to-one initiative in our elementary education program a year ago. So last August, all of our elementary ed students, sophomores and above, came the first day of class with an iPad. And we did give our faculty training in how to teach with those devices. And first, let me back up, how to use the devices ourselves, because we had some faculty who had never turned on an iPad. We started from ground zero, but how to use the devices and then how to teach with them, to the point where now we have faculty who are making iBooks to use with their students instead of having them buy textbooks, or who have pulled together all online resources instead of having their students buy textbooks. But it's a process. We have some people who are really gung-ho and they have a lot of great things, and then we have others who you're just pulling them along. And I think it's always going to be that way with teachers. You're always going to have that span of experience and motivation.
Well, and everybody has a different teaching style.
True.
So some styles don't necessarily align well with some of the new technologies, because there are still stylistic people who like to lecture, and there are still people who don't, who like the kids to lead it. And so I think, yeah, it's always going to be that way.
Since we had one-to-one last year, they wanted us to go paperless. And so I put everything on Google Classroom, and that was really helpful, but they won't let the kids take the computers home. And even if they do, they don't all have internet. So when they have assignments online and they don't have internet and they can't take a computer home, then that, like, you have kids who are done waiting, and you have kids, like, I can't punish them for not having it at home. Like, that's really hard too, to be able to, like, manage all the different levels of my kids and their pace.
Yeah, we still have some kinks to work out, definitely. Access and having the device. Yeah, it's a process. Absolutely. Well, ladies, thank you for being here this morning. It was an interesting discussion. We have no answers, right? Just lots of questions. We didn't solve any world problems this morning, but it's interesting to hear each other's perspectives and where things are going and some of your own views. So thanks for joining us today. This is all you have to do for this assignment. Just come here and talk. You're all totally finished. So the people who are going to watch the video, they'll write up a little kind of review of what they saw when they watched the video. But you all are finished. So thanks for coming by. And I'm going to stay on for a few minutes if anybody has questions about anything. I'll be glad to answer those, but we're finished if you need to get on with your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Dibler, I was just going to let you know the link that was on the assignment is different than the link that was in the email. So Amy and I were sitting just chatting with each other for like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and we're like, no one's here, what are we doing?
Did you try to call me?
Yeah, Amy did. We're like, let's try to call and see. And then, so finally we just decided we'd send you an email. And then when I was sending you an email, I was like, I wonder if I should click the link that is in the email that you sent yesterday. And
that's what happened. I'm sorry, Sarah.
No, it's fine. I mean, what would you like me to do?
You can watch the video. It's about 30 minutes, or you can come tonight.
Okay. Do you need me to, like, if I watch the video, do you need me to write a response? Yeah,
you'll just write a little paragraph or two.
Okay.
Your connections to what we talked about in the video. I'm sorry that happened.
No worries.
I heard my phone ringing not just a couple minutes ago, and I thought, I should have brought that in here with me, and I didn't. So
yeah, well, we were just like, what's going on? Like, I hope everything's okay. So
I don't know how the link got different. I'm sure it was probably something I did or didn't do. So I apologize.
Oh, no worries.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.